I'm significantly better, but I still need surgery. We have been flying some people around at great expense, dealing with some specialists and things, and they've been improving my condition. But the hospital in St. Kitts is extremely minimal, and so some of the surgeries I need, just performing them there is just too risky for that level of hospital. So we're trying to assess where to go next. But at least I'm up and talking. You see me when I can barely talk, and I'm on heavy duty painkillers, and so lately I've only been on lower level painkillers. I'm still dealing with pain. We finally got the infections under control. I was fighting infections for years, kidney and urinary infections. So I seem to be mostly infection free for the last 6 to 7 weeks, and my condition's significantly better, but I still need surgery,
Okay.
multiple surgeries, in fact.
And they just don't have the capacity to do it there on St. Kitts. And guys, if you're wondering why he is wanted by the FBI, I think Chad wonders that as well, as do the rest of us that are familiar with his
Yeah.
story. Because certainly no custody battle has ever brought forth such wrath from the feds. Now, Chad, there was some silver linings over the last month because you are having a bit of a moment on the internet. The Wanted
hmm
podcast on Spotify is doing extremely well. I listened to all three parts on my way home from
There's a
Toronto.
fourth one now with a lawyer.
Oh, there's a new one out. There's a
With a
new.
lawyer.
So
There's a
guys,
fourth one where a lawyer talks about my case, and he basically says the FBI is insane.
it is an affront to the allocation of public funds, my friend. It is incomprehensible to think about the millions of dollars they have spent searching you down while while your own son, who is now 27, by the way, folks, the son in question that the custody battle started
hmm
over is 27. Has made it clear there is no kidnapping, there is no any sort of foul play. It is just a nasty custody battle with some interesting caveats. Now, you got into it on the Wanted podcast, and I mean, I think a lot of people here know your story well enough where we could just jump into some stuff. If you don't know, either go watch the Wanted podcast or go watch one of my old YouTube videos featuring Chad,
hmm
because, like I said, we've been talking for months. Um, you you mentioned you lived in a closed city, and I gotta ask about
A
that.
formerly closed city. It wasn't closed when I lived there, but it was a city that used to be closed to foreigners.
So, can you explain to people what that is?
Well, in Russia, a lot of cities used to be very closed to foreigners. Basically, if you were not Russian, you were not allowed to live in the city. Like a lot of cities are exist only because of the factories that exist there. So there's a factory and there's a city near the factory, and people that live in the city are the people who work at the factory. And you need special permission to go in and out of the city, even if to like live in the city, even if you were Russian. I'm talking in Soviet times actually. And I lived in a city that was formerly closed. When I lived in it, it was not closed, but it was in 2001 when I first moved to Russia, and so it was very unusual for foreigners to be there. In fact, I talked to somebody recently, and he said, back in the 2000s, the only Americans that were in Russia, especially the places I was, were missionaries or spies. And I used to get that all the time. People are like, "Are you a missionary or a spy?" And I'm like, "Neither." And they're like, "No, you're one or the other." And so, yeah, it's whether it's connected to that, I don't know, but it's one of the leading theories because it makes no sense that this is over custody. I mean, the number of things they've done and lied in my case, they've, lied about my son's birth state, lied about my whereabouts, lied about my hometown. For the only other alternative to the only other alternative really to that or my travel in the Middle East is that it's sheer stupidity. But if it's sheer stupidity, it's stupidity to such an epic level that these people should not have driver's licenses, let alone be in the FBI. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of people involved in this case who have continually reviewed this case and kept it alive. So I just don't see how it's statistically probable that there are hundreds of people that are this epically stupid to be in power still.
I'm not buying it. There is something more going on here. They want you for something, my man Chad. They want you for something. If you guys, just another kind of brief bit of exposition, if you will. Chad was a Microsoft. What did you do exactly for Microsoft, Chad?
I had a variety of roles, but I was a worldwide Microsoft regional director. I was also a Microsoft regional developer advisor for the Middle East and Africa. Had a territory of 85 countries and 12 time zones, and I spent most of my time in Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Dubai, Oman, all those sorts of places. And I continually met with high level government officials.
So you were moving around. Sounds like a perfect recruit for a certain organization. You maybe even you were even approached at one point. You think maybe?
Yeah, no, for sure I was 3 times. At a minimum, I was approached 3 times by 3 different intelligence agencies, none of which were directly the U.S. government themselves. But see, the U.S. government, when they approach Americans, they have special rules. So they usually have allies do it. These were all 3 close allies. It was Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates in Dubai. Those were clear recruitment attempts. I may have had others. There are others because a lot of times they would come under the cover of a job offer. So you get these weird job offers and you weren't sure really what it was. But there were 3 that were absolutely clear that they were intelligence agencies trying to recruit me. And I mean, I traveled, I had a cover. We've talked about before, the CIA recruitment officers, some of them are on TikTok. They talk about it. What they do is they look for people to recruit. They find people who have covers and recruit them because it's easier to recruit somebody with a cover than it is to recruit somebody and build a cover. And I was traveling, in and out of places that Americans did not go or could not go because I was worked for Microsoft and they got me in and out of everywhere they wanted me to go. So I'd get calls from Saudi Arabia and they'd have me go to Saudi Arabia. At one time, there's a problem with my visa and the royal family got me in.
No shit. Well, see, and that's
Yeah.
just right. And if I listened to a podcast called the Y Files, and he talks about. I mean, there's probably 10% of any public-facing entity. We're talking journalists, representatives for large companies that travel. Like 1 out of 10 of these people are probably in some way feeding something to the CIA. And that sounds like an
Yeah.
absurd thing to say. It really is not. They actors, artists. I mean, Jesus Christ, Bret Easton Ellis wrote a novel about it, and then Ben Stiller ripped it off
Hmm.
by making Zoolander. This is based in reality. They will recruit people that have easy access, right?
Yep.
Easy,
Exactly.
unhindered access across borders. Boom. Can you carry this little message for us? It starts like that, and can go one of a million ways. This is certainly one of the strangest ways we've seen it go, and this is all documented. Chad, is there? So Chad, maybe let's rewind for a second. So you were posted up in the hospital for the past 3 weeks. Um, you are out now. What is the next step? What are we trying to do right now?
Mhm.
What's the goal for the end of the year? What can we
Well,
help?
right now, we have short-term and long-term goals. Long-term is to get the publicity and get this dismissed. Short-term, my health condition was just deteriorating so badly, and at some point, I was going to end up in kidney failure, and my quality of life was just so horrible. So we um, we burned some cash, and we've been flying some people around. I spent several weeks in the hospital. I was back at the hospital yesterday getting more tests. I was back at the hospital today getting more tests. So now at least I'm sleeping at home, and they have improved my condition. But we're just running a series of tests and we're really trying to determine the best way forward, giving the limited options we have. The best option is to get this dismissed and then I can travel to somewhere else to get the health care that I need. But in St. Kitts, with an island of 35,000 people, I mean, just imagine like a rural village in Alaska or something. The health care is just,
Yeah. Oh no, I can imagine. I'm sitting here in a town that would be facing the same troubles, my friend. If it was up to this hospital in town, yeah, wouldn't be able to do it. Um, is your family there with you? Is your wife and all the kids there with you?
oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Hmm.
Right on.
Yep.
Right on. And for anyone, like I said, I will try and keep you all up to date. For anyone new to the story, this is Chad Hauer, TikTok fugitive, the most wanted man on TikTok. Now, Chad, you are married to a Russian woman. Is that right?
Well, still am. For over 20 years.
Yes. By the way, guys, the Russian woman, that is Chad's second wife. He is still with her. It's the ex-wife with the custody battle who's causing all the problems. Um, what is it, Chad? Maybe we can just touch on it quick for anyone that might be new here. You have a little bit of a theory as to maybe why the government is so interested in you, your own government, may I add. I do have a follow-up question for this, but essentially you were living in a closed town, living with your wife and her family.
Formerly closed. Formerly closed.
Formerly closed city, and your wife's parents may have had some interesting roles which may be of interest to our government. Is that
No,
right?
they definitely had. They had the roles.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we looked at a lot of theories, but I started having problems pretty much immediately after I moved to Russia. Now, I'm going to mention 9/11. I know everybody's heads are going to freak out here. I'm not saying I had anything to do with that, but what happened after 9/11 was the U.S. government, the intelligence agencies, they just got turbocharged. The U.S. government threw so much money at them, and they just exploded in size. And that was just several months after I moved to Russia. And so one of the theories is that basically when they exploded, I got trapped in this big explosion of just trying. They threw out fishing nets and tried to catch anybody and everybody they could who was interesting. And then I got wrapped up in this because they knew I was in Russia and they knew who my wife's parents were. They worked. I want to be very limited what I say here, but they worked in a military factory that produced military airplanes for the Russian government, and they had high level access. It wasn't like sweeping the floor or something. They were engineers, and it seems that somebody in the intelligence community in the U.S. thought that maybe I could get access to that information. I never could. I was never gonna. I don't want to work for any government, whether it's Russian or American or Canadian or anybody. I don't want to work for any government. But it seems that maybe somebody had a wet dream and thought I could get access to it and was trying to turn me or something. I mean, it sounds crazy, but if you look at what's happened to me and when I started having problems, which was immediately after 9/11, which was several months after I moved to Russia, it all just kind of points back to that time. And I was on the KGB FSB watch list. I mean, but they never bothered me. And that's because I was married to her and her parents. And when we got married, they had to message, well, our daughter's married to an American. He's living in Russia. So they knew who I was. But they never bothered me. And it was pretty much like the few interactions I had with them, they're like, we're watching. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have anything to hide. So we cool.
Enjoy the
And it
show.
was pretty much,
Yeah.
and the Americans do that too. I mean, we've talked about this. I had a friend who worked for the U.S. government and he had security clearance and he married a Russian and they lived in Washington, D.C., and she was put in the FBI watch list because she was Russian. I mean, governments do this. It's not anything unusual. So when I was in the watch list, I was never really worried. I knew why I was in the watch list, and they never threatened me or anything. It was just basically, listen, we're watching you because of this, and that's it. I'm like, cool.
Well, it's such an absurd thing to think. Like, how is it, God, it's your fault, Chad, for meeting a woman and falling in love, and it just so happens that her parents work somewhere that might be interesting to some fucking American bureaucrat. Like, I love that this is the world we're living in. Like, that's none of your
Yeah.
fucking business. You know what I'm saying? That's none of their business. We are all private citizens, or we used to be, but I think we all know that that's not really the way it is. I was going to ask, so Russia has poke their head out and let you know, yeah, we're watching you too,
Oh
essentially.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That happened. No, that was back 2001. That happened several times because at the time I was traveling to Europe a lot, so I was in and out of the country like once or twice a month, and I got stopped coming in at your passport control. I got stopped all the time. I mean, it took me a lot longer to come in and out than anybody else, even other foreigners. I mean, and like back then, it was typically older women in immigration control, and they'd be just sitting there like, and the minute they'd swipe my passport, you could see the screen was flashing, and they'd wake right up, and they'd have to make a phone call. Yeah, they'd make a phone call before I could get in or out, and sometimes they would take me aside to like a small room in the side and just be like, "Where are you going?" I'd be like, "Germany," and they'd be like, "We're watching you, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And they're like, "Aren't you worried?" I'm like, "Listen, here's what it is," and like, "Okay, well, as long as you don't do anything wrong, we got no problem." And that it never lasted more than a few minutes. I can't. They were never interrogations. It was just basic questioning. It was like, "Hey, we're keeping an eye on you," and that was it.
Fascinating, man. Fascinating. So, can I ask this? And maybe there's a different name you'll want to say here, but you mentioned in the Wanted podcast, in the series featuring you, you mentioned that there's a DA that's heavily responsible for keeping this alive. What's that fella's name?
Christian Traybold, the prosecutor, he's basically the U.S. attorney. He's the U.S. attorney, and he's the lawyer for the FBI essentially.
So we'll go
He's
ahead
been
and
working hand in hand with Special Agent Kirk Brace, who's the FBI agent.
So I'm going to post this onto my YouTube after we're done talking, Chad, and I'm going to spell out that guy's name. And I'm gonna get the correct spelling from you, sir. And we're gonna spell that fucking name out big and fat here on the screen. And I want
Mhm.
everyone to reach out to that man and tell him to fucking figure it out. Let Chad go. Let Chad get the help he deserves. Because at this point, stop. Even though you don't even have to say that. Just send him a little message.
Mhm.
3 words. 4 words. Stop wasting our money. Stop
Yeah, and I want to let
wasting
everybody know
our
I'm
money.
I'm reading all the comments. So we're in two different streams, so I can't read his stream, but I'm reading all my comments. I just haven't had a chance to reply to them, but I appreciate all the comments. So keep the comments coming in my stream as well.
Yes, guys. And if anyone has any questions, that you want me to relay to Chad, we can do that over the next 10, 15 minutes. Chad, I am going to keep this one concise. We're going to do 30, 40-minute compact. I'll pump it out. It'll be
Yeah.
live on YouTube tonight, hopefully.
What do you think of the Wanted podcast?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I love the way he split it up too, and just the way he took, because your story has so many ins and outs and lots of fucking weird left turns. He makes it, guys, a really interesting narrative to follow and easy to follow. And I would start at part one. Each episode's what, about 30 minutes? About 30 minutes each?
Yeah, 20. None of them are more than 30. They're like 25, 27 minutes. The fourth one is with a lawyer, which I was not part of, and I didn't know was coming, but I was welcome to hear it. And a federal defense attorney comes in and talks about my case, and he basically says the prosecutor and the FBI are absolutely batshit insane.
Yes, Tad Wallace. Yes, he is currently wanted, still wanted. It was up until, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, it was up until last year, your 27-year-old son's 10-year-old photo was on a website for missing children up until last year, despite him having called them multiple times saying, I am not kidnapped. Like, it is me. And they said, nope, we can't remove it without a court order. So,
and doing TV interviews on Fox and ABC and having lawyers contact him, and they said, never remove without a court order. And then what got him removed? Viral TikTok.
Hey, TikTok doing its work, man. That's why they don't want us to have access to this. It's a good tool for getting a message out, especially when the traditional means of communications have utterly failed. I don't think it's even necessary to say it, but let's go ahead and just quickly rehash it. The mainstream media did what to you, Chad?
They railroaded me. I mean, it was such a one-sided story. They basically, it was a character assassination in the press. I mean, people from high school I went to with, they think first of all, they never even mentioned, a lot of the press coverage, at least in the headlines, never mentioned they were talking about my son. They made it look like I kidnapped and killed somebody. And was the impression that a lot of people got. The headlines were international kidnap tied to region, former Titusville man, kidnapped child, kidnapped teen. I mean, and the FBI portrayed it this way on purpose, and the press just sucked it up and ran with it. And the only time they got into the details was down in the subtext or like on page 26. It was never in the front page. And it's absolutely destroyed my reputation. And it's still, to this day, it's just it's horrible what they've done, and it's horrible what they've done to my son too, because I mean, he's known as the missing kid.
Did you see this Fabian Marta case, the Sound of Freedom donor that they tried to lampoon? You were in the hospital, so you might have missed this. It reminded me.
I saw the headlines, but not the details.
You want to know what? It's a custody thing as well. They are saying he kidnapped. Yes. The headlines, right? They're trying to discredit this movie for whatever reason. It's still just a fictional movie. I don't even know why there's such a big. It's a fascinating thing that we could go on a whole hour tangent about. So I'm just going to put a period in it.
What's crazy in my case, though, is remember the headlines all read that I kidnapped him November 6, 2006, but I wasn't even in the country at the time, and neither was he. He was already living in Europe for several years. And the last time he was in the United States, a judge removed him from his mother using police and sent him on a plane. So was it the judge that kidnapped him? Because the judge is the one who put him on the plane to London. And then he turns around and lays kidnapping charges on me. I mean, how does that work? I'm not even in the country. And all the headlines said, and even in the indictment says that I physically kidnapped him in November 2006, but I was not in the United States in November 2006. I was not even in Pennsylvania in 2006 at all.
And meanwhile, there's a judge. As this judge is handing out bench warrants for your arrest, there's another judge in Tennessee. Is it Tennessee? There's wherever the other judge in Tennessee sitting there going, no, Chad actually has full custody of the child. Like, should there not be some oversight there? Why can two judges
that's the thing.
From two different
because when the FBI took it, when she filed the papers, she forgot to tell them about the Tennessee orders, and the FBI knew about them but just decided to ignore them. Normally in a federal case like this, first of all, it should have never been made to this case because Pennsylvania, there were never any charges in Pennsylvania, not even a single charge, so let alone kidnapping. The only thing Pennsylvania ever issued for me was a bench warrant, which is equivalent to not showing up to court for a parking ticket. And the FBI took that bench warrant, got a fake kidnapping report on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and then totally ignored the Tennessee case, did not resolve the jurisdictional issue conflict at all, which they're supposed to do. And if you have a jurisdictional conflict, they're supposed to look at them and resolve them before they go federal. And not only that, but the Pennsylvania case was a temporary order and was freaking dismissed anyways. So they're using a dismissed order and ignoring the permanent order to charge me with kidnapping based on a failure to appear, which is equivalent to a parking ticket.
These are the judges and lawyers meant to uphold our system of justice. They just appear to be using it as their own little fun fucking obstacle course on how to fuck
And see,
Mr. Chad Howard
and see
over.
that's the thing. People who say this is just some bureaucratic mistake, this was no mistake. They knew what they were doing. This was purely intentional. And that's why I no longer believe it's just over this custody thing, because there have only been since they passed this international parental kidnapping law in the 90s, there have only been like 45 convictions, and they were all very clear cases of it.
And how many
And
times have they
this
failed
is
to
the case they're
extradite you,
going to stick,
Chad?
you know,
Sorry.
there's like 40, there's like 40 in the last 30 years, there's like 40 convictions. And this is the case they're going to run. And not only that, but when they went to the papers, they didn't mention international parental kidnapping. They just mentioned kidnapping.
Yeah.
That's what they told all the press. It was kidnapping.
It's not your own son who you have custody of, who's happy to be with you, yada, yada. How many times have they failed to extradite you, sir?
Three
Times. Hat trick. He's
from
got the hat
multiple
trick,
countries.
people. They've
Multiple
tried to
countries.
extradite Chad 3 fucking times. That is more than
That's as many times as Snowden, Assange, and Kim.com combined.
He's the most wanted man on TikTok, people. Is there anything else now? Maybe we can tease a little something. You had mentioned to me there might be something coming down the pipe here shortly.
Yeah, there's some. It's not final yet. So the problem is, for security reasons, you can understand, and it could also interfere with
We want
the
you.
completion of what we're doing.
Your
But
safety.
hopefully, I don't know if I was hoping I would have it by September, but it might be sometime in September. But we should have some pretty huge news
Okay.
that should give the FBI a pretty big freaking black eye. But I can't. I'd love to hint about it. I'll let you reveal it when it does come time. But because me revealing anything about it could put me in physical danger, I can't talk about it yet. But hopefully,
Say no more.
looking maybe in September, I'll be able to talk about that.
So, one last kind of thing to round up everything here, guys. Obviously, I think you guys know by now who Chad is. I think you know how disgusting it is what's happened to Chad. So I'm going to switch it up a bit just to current events. Chad, what are people on an island saying about what happened to Maui in Hawaii right now? Is there much talk of that in the Caribbean right now?
It's not. I mean, people are. They're very. They're. I mean, they're very disgusted about what happened. I mean, they're very appalled. It's a huge tragedy, but it's. I don't know how to describe it. It's just it's not Caribbean, so it's like when there's an earthquake in Japan. It's very tragic, but it's a different kind of part of the world,
They're not
and it's just it's so different.
they're not worried about being on an island, you
No,
know.
no, because it's wet. The Caribbean doesn't, especially St. Kitts. St. Kitts. I mean, we do get grass fires and things, but they're typically in the cane fields, and they don't go very far because the dry areas of the island are the lowlands, and most of the island is up higher, and the jungle just doesn't burn. The jungle just doesn't burn. So
A little
when we
damage.
do, and
Yeah.
plus not only that, but because of hurricanes and earthquakes and the building codes, probably like over 90% of the buildings in the Caribbean, or at least in St. Kitts, are concrete. And concrete doesn't, you might get a roof to burn or something, but the fire codes and the earthquake codes, it's typically not something they're worried about, at least not in our island. There are other islands that are much drier than us, but in St. Kitts, it's just, no, it's not something. I mean, they're all appalled by what's happening, but it's also very surreal too. I mean, the last death count I saw was like 100, and they're saying 1,100 missing, so we don't know where the final death toll is going to be. It's very appalling, but it's just like watching something from another part of the planet. It's not really, it doesn't really hit close to home. When we have earthquakes, or like, when the big earthquake happened in Haiti, that hit closer to home. When we have things that happen in the Caribbean, they tend to hit a lot closer to home.
You know what, Chad? The good thing is, the good people of the U.S. government are going to give each Maui resident 700 whole dollars. So I think
Yeah, I
that'll fix.
saw that.
I think that'll fix everything, right? They'll be
Well,
fine.
maybe if they stop wasting millions on me, they could contribute that millions towards the
Hey,
people in Hawaii.
yo, take the money we're spending on tracking a father and his fucking son across the world, and maybe give it to
Yep.
people who just lost everything in their life. I don't know. It makes too much sense. It makes too much sense for them to actually follow through with that one, Chad. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to get out there right now, this instant? Because I feel really
Mm.
good about this 30-minute packaged up little wrap it up, put it out there, let people see you, get people going to watch the Wanted podcast on Spotify to get the full story. 4 parts now, new part just out with a lawyer analyzing everything. So definitely gonna have to check that out, guys. This will be up on my YouTube. But is there anything else you want to say,
Yeah.
Chad, before we end
I,
up
I
this
just
episode?
want to thank the doctors, the many doctors that have been involved in my hospital stay and recovery over the previous weeks, because as you've seen there, I mean, I've done lives where I could barely talk, and even highly medicated, I could barely talk. And now I'm still dealing with pain, but they're manageable levels of pain. And I've even been going outside the house almost every day now, and going to different places. So I can't thank them personally yet because it still could endanger what we have still going on by identifying them. Because, as I said, we've had to move people around by plane, and I don't think the U.S. government's ever going to bother, but they could technically bother them for aiding and abetting a fugitive, even though they're just saving my life. But they could prevent them from traveling. They could cause them problems. So until it's done, I can't thank them personally, but I want them to know I genuinely appreciate it. I mean, they have improved my quality of life in ways that I just cannot describe.
Well, you seem in a better energy and better spirit. So I am feeling hopeful, my friend. I think I can feel the tide shifting. People are waking up to this, and we're going to do our part to try and push this again and again. And if you're able and willing, next week we'll do it.
Yeah,
We'll do
yeah,
it again. Fugitive Friday, every Friday, indefinitely until we get our man Chad home.
yeah. And 3 p.m. is a good time for me, so let's stick with that. And yep.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you as always for taking the time. And next week I might line up maybe some maybe a game. I'm gonna try and come up with maybe a little fun. I'll throw some ideas your way. We'll try and spice it up a bit.
Okay.
Maybe we could do
How many followers did you have in your stream today?
so we got 130 in here, but I'm saying probably over
Okay.
well over 1,000 people have come in, tuned in briefly at the very least, checked you out. We are up to over 5,000 subs on my YouTube channel. We are getting better play
Cool.
there. And I'll throw clips up on Instagram as well, which will get hundreds of
Mhm.
thousands of views.